Frank Sinatra was reading Variety in his suite at the Fontainebleau Hotel when the phone rang. It was 11:30 a.m. on March 8, 1960. Frank picked up expecting it to be his manager or maybe Dean calling about lunch. Instead, it was Sammy Davis Jr., and his voice was shaking. "Frank, I need to talk to you, right now." Frank set down the newspaper. "What's wrong?" "Not on the phone. Can I come to your suite?" "Yeah, come up." Sammy arrived 10 minutes later. He looked terrible. His eyes were red. His hands were shaking. Frank had never seen Sammy look scared before. Sammy Davis Jr. didn't get scared. He got nervous before big shows. He got anxious about reviews. But scared? Never. "Sit down," Frank said. Sammy sat on the couch. He was wearing sunglasses even though they were inside. Frank sat across from him. "Talk to me." Sammy took off his sunglasses. There was a bruise under his left eye. Fresh, maybe a few hours old. "Jesus Christ," Frank said. "What happened?" Sammy's voice was barely above a whisper. "I got into a situation last night. A bad situation." "What kind of situation?" Sammy looked down at his hands. "I was at a party, at some producer's house in Miami Beach, and there was this girl there, white girl. We started talking. One thing led to another. We ended up in one of the bedrooms." Frank felt his stomach drop. He knew where this was going. "Tell me someone didn't walk in." "Boyfriend walked in," Sammy said. "Or I guess he was her boyfriend. I didn't know. She didn't say anything about a boyfriend." And he lost his mind. Started screaming. Called me every name you can think of. Then he hit me. Frank stood up and walked to the window. Outside Miami Beach looked peaceful. Beautiful. Inside this room everything was falling apart. "Did you hit him back?" "No. I got out of there as fast as I could. Got in my car and drove back to the hotel." "Who was he?" Frank asked. "Who was the guy?" Sammy was quiet. "Tell me, Sammy." "His name is Carl Brody. He's connected. His uncle is Angelo Bruno." Frank closed his eyes. Angelo Bruno, Philadelphia mob boss. One of the most powerful crime figures on the East Coast. "You've got to be kidding me." "I wish I was," Sammy said. "Frank, this guy, he was screaming that he was going to kill me, that I touched his girl and nobody does that, that I'm a dead man." "Frank, I think he meant it." Frank turned around. "Did anyone else see what happened?" "Yeah, there were maybe 10 people at the party. They all saw." "Who were they?" "Anyone we know." Sammy listed some names. "A few producers. Some hangers. Nobody Frank trusted to keep their mouths shut." "This is bad," Frank said. "I know it's bad. That's why I'm here. Frank, I don't know what to do. If this gets out, if the newspapers find out I was with a white girl, I'm finished. And if Carl Brody decides to follow through on his threat." Sammy's voice broke. Frank sat back down. He needed to think. This wasn't just bad. This was catastrophic. In 1960, a black entertainer having relations with a white woman could destroy a career. It could get someone killed in some parts of the country. And if the woman's boyfriend was connected to the Philadelphia mob, it could get very dangerous very fast. "Okay," Frank said. "First thing, you're canceling your show tonight. Call the club and tell them you're sick." "Frank, I can't cancel. People are expecting. I don't care what people are expecting. You're not performing tonight. You're staying in this hotel until we figure this out." Sammy nodded. Frank picked up the phone and called someone in Chicago. A man named Momo Giancana, Sam Giancana, boss of the Chicago outfit, one of the most powerful mob bosses in America, and a friend of Frank's. The call took 5 minutes. Frank explained the situation. Giancana said he'd make some calls. He'd reach out to Angelo Bruno, see what could be done. But he didn't sound optimistic. Bruno's old school, Giancana told Frank. He doesn't like black guys dating white women. And if his nephew is making noise, Bruno's going to feel like he has to do something about it or he looks weak. Frank hung up. "I called Sam Giancana. He's going to talk to Angelo Bruno. Try to smooth this over." Sammy exhaled. "Thank you. Frank, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I didn't know she had a boyfriend. I didn't know he was connected. It doesn't matter now. What's done is done. Now we have to deal with it." They sat in silence for a while. Then Frank said, "Sammy, I have to ask you something and I need you to be honest with me." "Okay, is this going to keep happening?" Sammy looked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you going to keep getting into situations like this? Are you going to keep putting yourself in danger because you can't stay away from women who are going to get you killed?" Sammy's face hardened. "That's not fair, Frank, isn't it? This isn't the first time. Remember that actress in Los Angeles? Her husband showed up at your apartment with a gun. Remember the singer in New York? Her manager threatened to go to the newspapers. Sammy, you've got a pattern, and eventually, that pattern is going to get you killed." "I can't help who I'm attracted to," Sammy said. "Yes, you can. You can have some goddamn self-control. You can think about consequences before you act. You can." Frank stopped. He was getting angry and anger wasn't going to help. "Look, I'm not trying to lecture you. I'm trying to keep you alive. Because if Carl Brody decides he wants revenge, there's only so much I can do." "I know," Sammy said quietly. "I know." The phone rang. Frank answered it. It was Giancana calling back. The conversation was short. When Frank hung up, his face was grim. "What did he say?" Sammy asked. He talked to Bruno. Bruno says his nephew wants blood. Says you disrespected him and disrespected his family. Bruno's trying to calm him down, but he doesn't know if he can. So what does that mean? It means you're in danger. Real danger. And we need to get you out of Miami. Frank picked up the phone again and called his pilot. Told him to get the plane ready. They were leaving tonight. Where are we going? Sammy asked. Las Vegas. You're going to disappear for a while. Stay at my place in Palm Springs. Lay low until this blows over. What about my shows? I've got commitments. Forget your commitments. Your life is more important than your commitments. Sammy stood up. Frank, I can't just disappear. People will ask questions. The press will do what I tell them to do. I'll handle it. You just pack your things and be ready to leave in 2 hours. Sammy walked to the door, then stopped. Frank, why are you doing this? Why are you putting yourself in the middle of this? Frank looked at him. Because you're my friend, and because if something happens to you, I'm going to have to live with knowing I could have prevented it. You didn't cause this. I did. Doesn't matter. We're in it now, both of us. Sammy nodded and left. Frank sat back down and poured himself a drink. A large one. He thought about calling Nancy, his ex-wife, and telling the kids he might not see them for a while. Thought about calling Dean and explaining why Sammy was disappearing. Thought about all the things that could go wrong. At 6 p.m., Frank and Sammy were at the airport. Frank's private plane was waiting. They got on board. As they taxied down the runway, Sammy said, "What if Bruno's nephew comes after you for helping me?" "He won't," Frank said, but he didn't sound entirely sure. The truth was, Frank was taking a risk. By protecting Sammy, Frank was putting himself in potential conflict with a powerful mob family. It could cost him his relationships with other mob figures. It could cost him his safety. But Frank had made a decision. Sammy was his friend, his brother, and Frank Sinatra didn't abandon his brothers. They landed in Las Vegas 3 hours later. Frank's car was waiting. They drove to Palm Springs, to Frank's compound behind the gates where nobody could get to them. Frank set Sammy up in the guest house. "You're going to stay here for at least 2 weeks, maybe longer. Don't leave the property. Don't make phone calls. Don't contact anyone. Just stay here and stay quiet." "What are you going to do?" Sammy asked. "I'm going to fix this. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to fix it." Over the next week, Frank made calls. He talked to Giancana again. He talked to other mob figures who had influence with Angelo Bruno. He called in favors. He made promises. He put his own reputation on the line. And slowly, gradually, he started to make progress. Giancana convinced Bruno that having Sammy killed would bring unwanted attention, that the FBI was already watching Bruno's family, that a high-profile murder would make things worse. And Frank promised Bruno something. He promised that Sammy would make a very public apology, would get engaged to a black woman, would make it clear that the incident in Miami Beach was an aberration. Bruno agreed, but he had conditions. Sammy had to get married, not just engaged, married, and it had to happen soon, within a month, and it had to be to someone acceptable, someone who would make it clear that Sammy was back in his lane. Frank called Sammy into the main house, explained the situation. "You're getting married," Frank said. Sammy laughed. Then he realized Frank wasn't joking. "You're serious, dead serious. It's the only way out of this. Bruno wants to see you married to a black woman. That wants proof that you're not going to cause any more problems." "Frank, I can't just marry someone. I'm not even dating anyone seriously." "Then find someone fast. You've got 3 weeks. Sammy sat down. "This is insane. This is survival. You want to stay alive. You want to keep working. Then you're getting married." Sammy was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "There's a singer, Lorraine White. We've been seeing each other on and off. Nothing serious, but she's nice. Call her," Frank said. "Tell her you're going to marry her. Tell her whatever you need to tell her, but make it happen." 3 weeks later, on January 10th, 1958, this is 1960. 3 weeks later, in late March 1960, Sammy Davis Jr. married Lorraine White in a small ceremony in Las Vegas. Frank was there, so was Dean. The press covered it extensively. Sammy Davis Jr., the famous entertainer, settling down, getting married. The subtext was clear. Sammy was back where he belonged. The marriage lasted less than a year. Everyone knew it was a sham, a marriage of convenience, but it served its purpose. Angelo Bruno was satisfied. Carl Brody backed off, and Sammy's life was no longer in immediate danger. But the cost was real. Sammy had to marry someone he didn't love, had to pretend to be something he wasn't, had to live a lie for months to save his life. And Frank had to call in every favor he had to put his own relationships at risk, to have to promise things to very dangerous people. Years later, in 1989, when Sammy was dying, Frank visited him. They talked about a lot of things, and eventually they talked about Miami Beach, about Carl Brody, about the phone call at 11:30 in the morning that changed everything. "You saved my life that day," Sammy said. His voice was weak. "The cancer had taken everything. I did what I had to do," Frank said. "No, you did more than that. You put yourself at risk for me. You called in favors you'd been saving for years. You made promises to people you didn't want to make promises to, or for me. Frank took Sammy's hand. You're my brother, Sammy. What else was I going to do? Most people would have told me to handle it myself. Would have said I got myself into it. I could get myself out. I'm not most people. Sammy smiled. It was a weak smile, but it was real. No, you're not. They sat together in silence. Two old friends who had been through everything. Success, failure, danger, salvation, all of it. I never thanked you properly, Sammy said. For Miami. For making those calls. For getting me out. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. Because you didn't have to do it. You chose to do it. And that choice, Frank, that choice saved my life. Frank didn't say anything, because what could he say? Sammy was right. Frank had made a choice. Had decided that Sammy's life was worth the risk. Worth the favors. Worth the potential consequences. And he would make the same choice again. Because that's what you do for people you love. You protect them. Even when it's dangerous. Even when it's complicated. Even when it might cost you everything, Sammy. Davis Jr. died on May 16, 1990. Frank spoke at the funeral. Sammy Davis Jr. was my brother, Frank said. Not by blood, but by choice. And there were times when that choice was tested. Times when protecting Sammy meant risking my own safety, my own relationships, my own standing in a world where standing means everything. But I never hesitated. Because Sammy was worth it. Because his talent was worth protecting. Because his life mattered. Frank paused, looked out at the crowd. Some of you know about Miami Beach. About what happened there in 1960. About the danger Sammy was in. About the calls I made. The favors I called in. The promises I had to make. I never talked about it publicly because it wasn't my story to tell. It was Sammy's. For now that he's gone, I want you to know this. Sammy Davis Jr. made mistakes. He got himself into situations that could have killed him. But he was also loyal and talented and brave. And when he needed help, I was there. Because that's what brothers do. They show up. Even when it's hard. Even when it's dangerous. Even when the smart thing would be to walk away. After the funeral, Dean pulled Frank aside. That thing in Miami, Dean said. I never knew how bad it was. You never told me. You didn't need to know, Frank said. Did it really almost get him killed? Yeah, it really almost got him killed. Dean shook his head. And you just fixed it. I did what I could. Frank, you called Sam Giancana. You got involved with the Philadelphia mob. You put yourself at risk. For Sammy. Frank looked at Dean. What would you have had me do? Let them kill him? No, I don't know if I would have had the guts to do what you did. To make those calls. To take those risks. Frank smiled sadly. Sure, you would have. If it was your friend. If it was someone you loved. You would have done the same thing. Dean thought about that. Then he nodded. Yeah, I guess I would have. They stood there together. Two survivors of the Rat Pack. Thinking about their friend. About all the times they'd saved each other. All the times they'd risked something to protect each other. That's what the Rat Pack really was. Not the jokes or the songs or the swagger. It was three men, sometimes four or five, depending on who you counted, who had decided they were family, and family protected each other, no matter what the cost. Frank Sinatra died 8 years later. In 1998, among his papers, his children found a note. It was dated March 8, 1960, the day Sammy had called him from Miami Beach. The note said, "Today I made promises to people I shouldn't have made promises to. I called in favors I was saving for emergencies. I put myself at risk for someone else's mistakes. But I would do it again. Because Sammy's life is worth more than my comfort. His future is worth more than my convenience. And if protecting him costs me something, then that's a price I'm willing to pay. That's what it means to have a brother." That was Frank Sinatra. Not the public image. Not the legend. But the real man. The man who made dangerous phone calls to save his friend. The man who called in favors from mob bosses. The man who risked his own safety because someone he loved was in danger. That Frank Sinatra never made it into the history books. Never made it into the documentaries. But he was the realest version of Frank Sinatra that ever existed.